Okay, so I know this is probably a source of real frustration for a lot of triathletes out there, doing hours and hours of drills, but not necessarily making the technique improvements that they wish they could. And I think the first thing to understand is the process that you really have to go through. So when you're improving your swim technique, you're effectively trying to change movement patterns that are ingrained within you from, years of swimming in a certain way. It's a little bit like changing your running stride. It's something that's so ingrained in you, it's very hard to do. And so I think the first thing is it takes commitment, really, but it is possible to make big improvements to your swim stroke. But you do have to start off by understanding that what you're effectively trying to do is redesign that mind-muscle connection. So even just moving your hand entry from out of your face to just in line with your shoulder, that is trying to work against something that you've been doing for years. Okay, so first just understanding kind of the scale of what you're trying to achieve. And that's not to put you off, but it's just to kind of just perhaps give you a sense of perspective. And then it's not going to be a quick fix, which I know is frustrating for everybody. But basically, you need to understand that you're effectively trying to remap your neurological pathways, and that takes time. But the second thing is really making sure that you understand what you're trying to achieve, what the ideal swim stroke looks like and where you're trying to get to. So for that, I'd really recommend watching our stroke cycle video, where I basically dissect Coach Matt's swim stroke and talk about kind of what we want to see in an ideal scenario. I'd have a watch of that, because that will give you a sense of kind of what you are trying to achieve. So for instance, where you want your hand entering, what you want your arms doing during the recovery phase after exiting the water, what you're trying to achieve with your kick and things like that. So just start there. Make sure you understand fully what it is you're trying to achieve. Okay, because once you've got that image in your mind, you can then start to really understand the purpose of the drills, of the technique work that you're doing in the pool. And I think unless you've got that understanding, all the drills, all the technique work, it's probably going to come to nothing. So make sure you kind of start there. And then the third thing is that when you have that understanding of both the process and what you're trying to achieve, just understand it takes a lot of repetition. So remapping those neurological pathways takes a lot of time. You have to take something that has been wholly habitual and turn something else into a habit. And what you will find is that it's quite easy. Well, it's relatively easy to make changes when you're working at low intensity, but it's when you're really pushing yourself that things start to fall apart. And of course is when you really want that technique to be spot on. So lots of repetition. So how do you do that? Well, there is an argument over the effectiveness of drills. Some coaches believe that actually it's better to kind of try and incorporate changes whilst you're swimming. So just in your normal swim stroke, so just kind of thinking about moving your hand to a different place, etc. And to a certain extent, I do agree with that, but only really for people that kind of struggle to grasp the purpose of the drills. If you really understand what you're trying to achieve with drills, and you really understand kind of the process like I've just talked about, they can be super effective, okay? Because what they do is they focus your mind on an individual aspect of the stroke. And so if you kind of, they're a little bit like activation exercises. If you can activate the right muscles to work in a certain way, and you just repeat it time and time again, and then try and incorporate that into your full swim stroke, honestly, that transition, it is effective. So personally, yeah, I think drills can be effective. But I don't personally believe in doing kind of standalone technique sessions, because I think when you do standalone technique sessions, you obsess over minor points and you effectively kind of overthink things. You have too much going on in your mind, and often they can actually just be a bit detrimental. You don't really achieve much. So our advice on incorporating drills or technique work is you need to do little and often. So for our athletes, it's every single swim session as part of their warm-up. They will have a certain technique focus that is individual to them, to the particular issues that we've identified for them. So if you're doing drills, make sure you know what you're trying to achieve. Make sure you know exactly the technique element that that drill is focusing on, and then repeat, and just do it for weeks on end. So you're talking, I would say, kind of at least 6 to 8 weeks before a specific individual technique point is kind of starts to become ingrained, and that's assuming you're swimming sort of 2-3 times a week. And just be really patient with it, seeing it as a long-term process over the course of, you know, a year, 2 years perhaps, which I know is not what people want to hear, but it's the honest truth. So just make sure that you're creating yourself a little bit of a plan. You're being honest with yourself about kind of what you can achieve in the time frame. And yeah, if you need any more advice, just come to us and we're always happy to help.